Good afternoon. This is George Kriza, CEO of Challenging Decisions, taking a moment to speak with a good friend of ours, Khanai Kapadia, who is a management consultant, just like we are, except Khanai has some really interesting methods that he uses that he'd like to share with us this afternoon. And to begin, Khanai, maybe you could give us a little bit of insight into your own background. Tell us something about yourself that would be helpful to people listening.
Sure. So I think one of the first questions people ask me is, how is it that you give business consulting, business management consulting advice to CEOs when you've never been a CEO of a mid-sized business? And it's a good question. And if you look into my background, what you'll see is a lot of technology and operations consulting, and I've certainly seen my fair share of businesses. But when I launched this company about 8 years ago, I did so because I had already spent a lot of time as a consultant, frankly, dissatisfied with the value that in general companies get from solutions that they're spending money on. Put it differently, they spend tons of money on solutions that in the end, it's questionable how much they have to show for them. And I really wanted to be doing the type of work that was consistently generating return on investment for customers. And I ultimately found it's about following a disciplined process more so than luck or the right people, although certainly those things will never serve you wrong. But following a pretty disciplined process really gets you there.
Can you give us a sense of scale, Khanai, about, you talk about how much money is wasted. Give us a little bit of sense of scale of how much, let's say, a Fortune 1000 company will routinely spend to consultants and what they may or may not have to show for it.
I don't have any great industry benchmarks, to be honest, but I'll tell you this much. Our first client was at about 140 million in revenue, 32% net margin. So they're already a very profitable business. And we got hired actually not to address profitability, but a growth challenge they're facing. And we, through the process that we follow, we were looking simply for earnings, whether it was from growth or better, more efficient operations. And we found 2 to 3 million in annual savings that they would generate. So it's a business that's already at scale, highly profitable, more focused on growth, honestly, than profit, because they're already profitable, although there's no such thing as a business that's too profitable. And still, we found this money there. And so I think, your question is very telling in many ways, that people look comparatively at themselves versus others and, how much money are we wasting? But every business has unique issues and opportunities. And it behooves whomever the consultant is or whomever the management team is to be looking for those things, not just comparing themselves to some ultimately somewhat arbitrary industry benchmark.
So would you say that your type of consulting is more operationally focused, or how would you characterize it?
Well, it's all of the above, and that's part and parcel to the philosophy. So the philosophy goes something like this, especially if you think about it from the CEO's seat. I've got 99 problems, and I'm not sure this thing you're telling me about should be one of them. And the question at the end of the day is, how important is it? Choose your topic: operations, strategy, sales, marketing, inclusion and diversity. All these things matter. They all matter. The question is how much. And so our thought process is, you really have to look at all of them. You have to look at all the process improvement things you could do, technology automation, better hiring practices, better onboarding, offboarding, strategically speaking, looking for adjacent product and market opportunities, stronger value propositions. All these things, they all matter, especially if you're the CEO of the business, and you have to decide where do we put our focus, time and money, to make progress. Where will we get the best bang for buck? And so it's about first understanding what these overwhelming number of things are, and then whittling it down to the things that will really make a difference.
So it's interesting the way you put that, especially with, let's say, 50 to 100 things on a CEO's plate that are percolating and may or may not be running effectively.
Mm-hmm.
But there must be something unique about your approach that helps you identify where is the biggest bang for the buck or the greatest return on investment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some of it's methodology, and I'll get into that, and hopefully it's useful to some folks out there. But the second element of it is just hard work. It's discipline. It takes time to do this sort of analysis, whether you're doing it yourself or hiring someone else like us to do it. So the approach goes like this. First and foremost, the way we're fast and comprehensive is we curate questions. And at some point in my company's journey, I hired a gentleman named Jed Jacobs, and Jed had run NEC USA. Prior to that, he was CFO, and prior to that, he was head of sales in that organization and also elsewhere. And after those roles, he went off to do middle market turnarounds in anywhere from a couple $1 million company all the way up to $200-300 million companies, where in his case, he became CEO for an interim period, helped get them back to growth, back to profitability, and then moved on to the next one, so to speak. And he had developed this playbook of questions that he would use going in. He called it, very simplistically, his opening questionnaire. And that opening questionnaire is something that we took and evolved. And we continue to add to it with things that we learn are little things, seemingly small things in the grand scheme of things, but actually have significant P&L consequences. So those questions are the body of knowledge that we start with. We also start with a lot of analysis. I don't call it analytics because it's about more than just data that fits in a spreadsheet, but it's analysis of who and what in a business drive revenue and profit. And if you think about that single, I've packed a lot into that single question, but if you think about that single question, and also if you understand why, then you know a lot about your business. You know what does and doesn't drive revenue and profit. You know where you should grow, or at least you have significant information about where you should grow, i.e. what's most profitable, which has not just the biggest market potential, but the biggest earnings growth potential. And that informs a tremendous amount about what the business should organize around. Now, you do have to look at execution. You can't be strategy only. But I would say, just to summarize, like the key areas where our clients get insights are, from a strategy standpoint, just adjacent opportunities that they aren't necessarily focused on. And then operationally, they see a lot of the things that we quote unquote find and present back to them, but we show them how much it's costing them or how much it's leaving on the table. And that provides really interesting context. Just to give you an example, recently we, with one of our clients, came to this conclusion that they really should put in place a very well-defined account development approach. And it's not a new idea. They've been talking about this for 10 years. But what they didn't do necessarily that we did was we calculated how much was it worth to them. And if it's worth, and as it is in their case, $15 million a year in annual top line with modest assumptions about success, our more generous assumptions put it much higher even, but $15 million a year in annual top line with about 20% net margin contribution, or excuse me, gross margin contribution in their case, it's worth spending some money to develop that program. It's worth training your people, or perhaps a little bit of turnover, to get the right team in place to build that business. And if you look at not just the annual earnings contribution, but the valuation the valuation improvement, it's sort of, it's a no-brainer. Their reaction was, my gosh, why have we been sitting on this for so long? And part of our benefit to them was, well, that was one of 100 different ideas they had for how their business could grow. This helped them identify what was most financially attractive. And there's a formula to that. Your business is challenging decisions, and our approach to decision making is that it's actually not rocket science. And the questions that you need to answer in order to make a well-informed business decision are actually the same each time. Most people even know what those questions are. We've sort of boiled it down to 5 and created an acronym and all this good stuff for it. But it comes down to these short list of questions about how much is it worth? What's the solution? When will we see return on investment? How exactly? Very good questions that a lot of times people say, well, based on experience, we know that this is going to work. And that may have worked in the past for them, but as a business grows and gets more complicated, that works less and less often.
Well, you brought up an acronym. Let's hear it.
So the acronym is PRISM. And rather than explain the acronym, I'll explain the 5 questions that you really want to answer. Okay. And the first is, what is the P&L? What's the P&L problem or opportunity that you're trying to address? And that seems almost like a throwaway, but it's so often I find people identify problems that they want to solve, and that they to their core believe are important to solve without understanding, well, how much is it worth? And or does it actually support the P&L objective of the business? And so that's the first thing. The second thing is R, which is root cause, which is you want to understand why it's happening. If you solve for the symptom, you're probably going to be unhappy with your return on investment. Root cause is much harder to identify. Cause and effect is really complicated in business. It's not always a person. It's not always a process. There's not always one thing that underlies the issue. And so you really have to understand what the root issues are behind the opportunity or issue based on how you're looking at it. Third thing is information. And this is quite simply data. Is how do you know? So if you're saying X, Y, and Z are the root causes of something, growth has stalled. Why is growth stalled? If you simply base it on experience, not to discount experience, but you have to identify what elements of what experiences have you had that make you certain that that's one of the issues at hand. So that information step is key. And the fourth is S, solutions. You got to know what your solution is. You can't simply admire the problem or identify a problem that's unsolvable in all practical senses of the word or the context. And then lastly is metrics. Is you have to know what are the metrics going to be for how you'll measure return on investment. It's a lot trickier. It's a lot trickier than at first glance to identify an improvement that you made and its exact contribution to the business. So those are the 5 components, and really it's the same 5 questions that come up each time you're trying to make a decision. And so that's the mantra we follow, and consistently people look at it, and there are always some new things that we identify about their business that is really valuable for them to know about. But probably one of the most clarifying elements of this is just answering these questions with regards to the different things they know or suspect might be opportunities or issues, again, depending on your language preference in their business.
So in trying to do this analysis and helping people inflect their business upwards in one vector or another,
Mhm.
from your perspective, can you engage with anyone on the executive team, or what's most important?
What's most important, so typically who is interested in talking with us are CEOs, COOs, CFOs, folks who are most traditionally responsible for leading the business and for the P&L of the business. But really anyone who considers themselves a leader in a business, who is actually thinking about how the objectives that have been defined for this business, how do we move this company towards it? And their thought process is led by that rather than, say, their job description or job security or things that are more self-interest oriented. Those sorts of leaders are just as they're just as compelling an entry point for us, and we're willing to work with them and help their management team see what they see as the
So it's
opportunity.
not just the CEO, it's people that still go at the very top of the company.
It's people who consider themselves a leader, and they exist at every level in an organization. Hopefully,
Got it.
yeah.
So is there anything else you want to share with us that makes your approach unique before we sign off today?
Um, Probably one or two things. One is just actually I'll go with three things. So the first is our intent with every client is to become a profit center rather than a cost center. And if you think about what that means, it's substantial because most consulting costs you money and doesn't have direct relation to financial value creation. You may see the benefit, but the direct connection to earnings and valuation improvement isn't there. And that's, if that's what you want, that's what we do. And we should perhaps talk. The second thing is, I think a lot of management consultants come in with their expertise. And we believe that the right role of experience is asking the right questions, not having all the right answers. Because again, every business has different issues and opportunities. And then third is just respecting our clients' accomplishments. As much as we're getting asked to find what else they could do or what they might do better, I think there's a healthy amount of admiration we have for our clients' accomplishments that is really important to actually working together well. And that's a big part of our culture and why people work with us. And so if those things are compelling and of interest, we're potentially a good fit.
And what's the typical size of the company that you're pointing at?
Generally about so 10 million to about 150, 200 million is a good fit for us. If we're going to do something beyond that, in terms of organizational size or revenue size, it really comes down to the complexity of the business. We're just at a scale where that's a good fit for us, being able to do the analysis in a 30-ish day period of time and give them the clarity with enough speed to move forward that they get really enthusiastic and energized about what lies ahead for them.
So what would be given all that you've told us, if someone is interested in perhaps having an introductory with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, so first of all, if you just want to learn more about us, we have a podcast that I host, and you can find it on our website at kgkcompany.com. We've also started hosting webinars. A lot of folks are interested in our methodology and just learning about it. And so we host webinars. You can send me an email and I can send you an introduction or a link to our next webinar. And you're welcome to join and learn more. And of course, if you want to engage directly with me and have a conversation, shoot me an email or give me a phone call. You can, I'll include that information in the video notes, and just reach out. Happy to talk.
All right, sounds great. Well, we appreciate the time we spent today, Khanai.
Yeah.
And we certainly see the value that you offer to the appropriate size organization.
Yeah. Thanks,
All
George.
right.
Good to talk
Thank
to you.
you.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.